Happiness comes from what happens to you. Blessing is what happens to you through knowing God and meditating on His words. God promises you fruitfulness, which yields its fruit in season. Vitality, whose leaves do not wither, and prosperity. Whatever they do prospers, though not necessarily material prosperity. This message is backed up by a glance across at the ultimate fate of the wicked. The psalmist does not try to pretend that the wicked don't sometimes prosper. He simply reminds us of the transitory nature of their prosperity. They are like chaff that the wind blows away. They will perish. The key to lasting and ultimately eternal fruitfulness and vitality lies in your relationship with God. As you seek to follow the way of the righteous, you are assured that the Lord Himself will watch over you. Lord, thank you for your wonderful promises as I resolve to make a regular habit of delighting in your word and meditating on it. New Testament from Matthew 1. Focus on Jesus. Resolve to focus your life on Jesus. The Bible's all about Jesus. The New Testament opens with His family tree. As we read the list of Jesus' ancestors, it's encouraging to see that they include Tamar, the adulteress, Rahab, who's described as a prostitute, Ruth, the non-Jewish Moabite, Solomon, who was conceived after King David's adulterous affair with Bathsheba, as well as many others. Thankfully, God uses sinful human beings and therefore can use us. Whatever your past, however broken your life may seem right now, God can use you to do something great with your life. The very name Jesus means He will save His people from their sins. Every time we use the name Jesus, it reminds us that our greatest need is not for happiness or contentment, although these may both be byproducts. Our greatest need, as with Jesus' ancestors, is for forgiveness. Therefore, we need a Savior. The beginning of Matthew shows us that Jesus is the completion of all that is recorded in the Old Testament. First, Jesus is the climax of history. Matthew opens his Gospel by summarizing the Old Testament story in terms of Jesus' ancestry. The Old Testament tells a story that Jesus completes. Matthew sets out the history of the people of God in terms of 3 equal periods: 14 generations from Abraham to David, 14 from David to the exile, and 14 from the exile to Christ. In the genealogy, biological generations skipped over, as was quite common in Old Testament family trees. Matthew was pointing out that Old Testament history falls into 3 approximately equal spans of time between crucial events. Jesus is the end of the line as far as the Old Testament story goes. The climax has been reached. Second, in Jesus, all the promises of God are fulfilled. Jesus is not only the completion of the Old Testament story at a historical level, He's also the fulfillment of the Old Testament prophecies and all of God's promises. Matthew concludes each of 5 scenes from the conception, birth, and early childhood of Jesus by quoting the Hebrew scriptures that have been fulfilled by the events described. The first one is the fulfillment in the conception of Jesus. All this took place to fulfill what the Lord had said through the prophet. The virgin will be with child and will give birth to a son, and they will call him Emmanuel, which means God with us. All of history, prophecy and promise is completed in Jesus. Your whole life is completed in Jesus. Every part of your life, your work, family, relationships, friends, memories and dreams are completed in Jesus. Lord, thank you for this promise